Welcome. Happy New Year. This is my first broadcast of 2026. I want to thank Kurt Schlichter, who sat in for me on December 26th and every show thereafter as I moved out to the West Coast for a few weeks and also got the flu, which is inevitable if you fly cross country this time of the year. But thank you, Kurt. Did a fabulous bang-up job as usual. I have new stations and station changes all across the Salem radio network. Salem News Channel is still the same. And I will cover all that, who I am, what I do, in hour two today. And I hope you'll subscribe and like the podcast, Highly Concentrated Hugh. If you can't catch the program when it's live in your car, 3 to 6 in the east, noon to 3 in the west, and different times in between, different stations carried at different times. The podcast is always a good way to start the morning. You get all the news that you need and the analysis that you want and the consistent delivery of clear, concise facts, my take, the great guests that we've been doing on this program since 2000. I've been in the business since 1990, both radio and television. And whether you're listening on the Salem Radio Network, watching on the Salem News Channel, picking up a YouTube clip, or listening to the podcast, welcome. You should also know I'm about to talk about the news, and you've got to adjust for the fact I am a Fox News contributor. I think Bret Baier is the best newsman in the business. I don't think anyone can ever measure up to Special Report. But everything we do here, we do with 6 people, right? It's me and Dwayne, Adam, the 3 of us have been together for 25 years plus, Harley, Danielle, Diana, and Ben. That's it. 6 people, we do this whole thing. And we are, I think, the very best at news and analysis and great guests and commentary of anyone in broadcast in any format. And I think you find it right here. If you want a nightly news program backed up by bureaus and analysts and people reporting from around the world, that would be Fox News Special Report with Bret Baier. But yesterday, CBS Evening News, soon-to-be anchor Tony DeCouple, laid out a video that I want you to hear, and then I'm going to talk with you about it. Barry Weiss, of course, became the head of CBS News division late last year when a sale of the network occurred, and she was hired by the new bosses. She founded the Free Press, New York Times editorial board, Wall Street Journal editorial board. I've only talked to her once. I've never met her. Barry Weiss, I think, is a center-left person. Sort of a classic liberal left person, but I don't know her well enough to say that with great conviction. But she's, of course, compared to most of the major news outlets in the United States, considered a conservative. She's not. She's not a conservative. But she's fair, and she's trying to rebuild the brand. And to that end, Tony DeCouple released this video yesterday.
A lot has changed since the first person sat in this chair. But for me, the biggest difference is people do not trust us like they used to. And it's not just us, it's all of legacy media.
Is our machine, is that breaking down on us already? All right, so I get it. And he goes on to say a lot. Our clip isn't working for some reason. I'll reload it and replay it at length. I want you to go over to CBS Evening News or Tony DeCouple and find it and watch it. He promises, and I want to make sure that I give you the money clip. I report for you, he tells the American public via the video available at CBS Evening News on X, which means I tell you what I know, when I know it, and how I know it. And when I get it wrong, I'll tell you that too. Now, that's the heart of it, and I think that's good. I'm not going to stop watching Bret Baier and Special Report because it's the best news program out there. But I'll at least give Tony and the gang at CBS Evening News a chance to show me that they've come back in from, it's not left field. To use a baseball analogy for the benefit of the Steelers fans, center field is where Huntley and Brinkley and Walter Cronkite and Frank Reynolds and Peter Jennings played forever. They were in center field. And I play in right field. And most of legacy media is in left field, but unfortunately, the television networks, including most of CNN, went into the left field bleachers over the last 30 to 40 years. And I've stayed the same. I'm a center-right guy. I've stayed the same for the whole time. And as a result, with a bunch of other factors, including the availability of media, streaming services, lots of choices, people on their devices not glued to the television set or their streaming platform, not watching the evening news. It used to be at the height of CBS, Walter Cronkite had a 7 share. All right, so it was enormous for that period of time, late 60s, early 70s. Last month, ABC World News Tonight, 6:30 p.m. with David Muir, averages about 7.19 million viewers. NBC Nightly News averaged about 5.63 million viewers. CBS Evening News, about 3.55 million viewers. And our friend Brett and Special Report, they're always above 3 million. And some days they beat all 3 of the networks when there's big news, when people are going there, when breaking news is happening, like arguably right now. What happened in those years? By contrast, by the way, got a couple of metrics for you. So 7 million over at ABC, 5.6 at NBC, 3.55 at CBS. They do have to shake things up at CBS because they're dying. What happened to compare? NBC Sunday Night Football in December, Vikings Cowboys, 19.61 million viewers. CBS, so it's not just CBS, it's just the news division. CBS had a late night National Football League game on Sunday, had 24.5 million viewers. Fox News and CNN's just not even in the game. They're so broken, I don't even bother with that. The weeknight edition of CBS, ABC, and NBC airs at 6:30 p.m. Brett starts at 6 p.m., so you got a little bit of an advantage, and he goes for an hour, and they go for a half hour. Now, Cronkite, CBS Evening News, at its peak, had between 27 and 29 million viewers every night. That was when the population of the country was 200 million. It's 340 million now. And what needs to happen is quite obvious. You just got to tell the truth. Let's try Tony again. Here's
a lot has changed since the first person sat in this chair. But for me, the biggest difference is people do not trust us like they used to. And it's not just us. It's all of legacy media. And I get it. I get it because I've been hearing about it from just about everybody for more than 20 years as I've traveled America on this assignment or that. My mom's neighbors in West Virginia, my own neighbors in New York City, thousands and thousands of conversations in between. Sometimes people want to talk to me about our coverage of NAFTA or the Iraq War. Other times it's all about Hillary Clinton's emails or Russiagate. Or more recently, COVID lockdowns, Hunter Biden's laptop, or the president's fitness for office. The point is, on too many stories, the press has missed the story because we've taken into account the perspective of advocates and not the average American. Or we put too much weight in the analysis of academics or elites and not enough on you. And I know this because at certain points, I have been you. I have felt this way too. I felt like what I was seeing and hearing on the news didn't reflect what I was seeing and hearing in my own life, and that the most urgent questions simply weren't being asked. So here's my promise to you, today and every time you see me in this chair. You come first, not advertisers, not politicians, not corporate interests. And yes, that does include the corporate owners of CBS. I report for you, which means I tell you what I know, when I know it, and how I know it. And when I get it wrong, I'll tell you that too. It also means I'm going to talk to everybody and hold everyone in public life to the very same standard. After all, I became a journalist to talk to people. I love talking to people about what works in this country, what doesn't, and not only what should change, but the good ideas that should never change. I think telling the truth is one of them. I'm Tony DeCopel, the anchor of the CBS Evening News. Hold me to it.
That will start on Monday night. It's a good mission statement. I hope he makes it. I want to correct him. I was not late on COVID. I was not late on the laptop. I was not late on Joe Biden's infirmity. I was early, if not first, on all those stories. But I want to tell you what the difference is between then and now. 1977, between my junior and senior year in college in the summer, 5 other guys and I would watch 60 Minutes every Sunday night. Back then it had an audience of about 25 million people. Now it's down to 10 million people, and not many young men are watching it. Why? It's more often than not just bad television, and it's not reliable. Now, I like Ed Whitaker. I met him recently. I think he's pretty smart. But all of news depends not just on anchors and faces, but on the head of the news division, the producers of the segments and the day parts, the journalists, the writers, and then the editors, and then the anchor. So a lot's got to change at CBS News. But I'm willing to give them a chance. I'm willing to see if they can, in fact, fix having gone into the left field bleachers. Eli Lake is the host of the Breaking History podcast. He's a contributor to the Free Press, frequently heard on Commentary's podcast as well. And we caught Eli unaware, so he got a T-shirt on. Is he still celebrating?
My bad.
The holidays are over, Eli. The holidays are over, you know.
I filed a very good column on Iran, by the way. I just didn't realize I was going to be on air.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I want to talk to you about Iran, but before that, I want to talk to you about CBS Evening News and Tony DeCopel's thing yesterday. Did you watch his video yesterday?
I saw the message about how CBS is now going to be trying to cover more stories that are relevant to all of America, and I applaud it 100%. I think he's going to do great.
So do I. Now, I've been in the news business since 1990, so I'm an old guy, and I've been doing this forever on radio and television for network and for PBS and for NBC and Fox and on the radio for forever. You've been in the print business for a long time, right?
Yeah, since the mid-90s.
All right, so we're contemporaries. I'm older than you are. What do you think went wrong with television news specifically? I just gave my opinions. I'm wondering what yours are.
I think with elite, like sort of the mainstream, the top television news, we're talking about, you know, CBS, like 60 Minutes, New York, but also the New York Times and things like that. I think it really happened. There was always a bit of a liberal bias, but there was also a commitment to the editorial process. I think after Trump wins in 2016, the elite sense makers in the news business, and I mean television news as well, kind of became part of like a big Borg-like structure that we might call like resistance. And once you become a kind of political actor, it's very difficult to then also be the chronicler of our times, the news person. I just wrote a review of a new documentary on Seymour Hersh, and I think that's kind of what happened to Cy Hersh. Cy Hersh began breaking really important and big stories about the overreach and abuses of our national security state. But over time, he also became a kind of advocate. And I think something like that happened in places like CBS News, you know, and ABC News and so forth, which is that once you sort of stop doing the process and trying to get fair comment and trying to sort of say, we're going to do stories that are relevant to our readers, then at that point, our viewers, then at that point, it becomes more a part of advocacy and less a part of journalism.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I believe. Agenda-driven journalism isn't journalism. It is an agenda being driven by the vehicles that used to be journalism. Now, when I say journalism, you mentioned 60 Minutes. I was a 60 Minutes addict. I just think it broke when it came to quality and quantity. It just didn't deliver the goods. And there are a lot of options now on Sunday night. I began the program by saying when I was 21 and, you know, the summer between my junior and senior year in college, a half dozen guys would get together on Sunday night to watch 60 Minutes and have a couple of beers because football was over. And, you know, we were young men. That demo's gone now from television, isn't it?
I mean, it's a totally different media world right now, and everybody can kind of a la carte their menu of what they want to watch. So the idea that everyone's gathering in a dorm room to watch a presidential debate or 60 Minutes or something like that, I mean, those days are over. I think that we have that sort of version of that experience on social media when we talk about big news events, but it's not the same as it used to be, where we were sort of all watching it together at the same time.
Which brings me to the test case. The biggest news event in the world right now is Iran, by a magnitude of 10, maybe 100, bigger than Minnesota fraud, bigger than what they're doing at CBS. It's their fourth revolution, the original 79 revolution, the 1990s, late 1990s. Then we had the Green Movement, and then we had 2022. Unfortunately, for the Iranian people, weak democratic presidents and administrations were in power in each of those four moments. This time is different, and all I want the American government to do is pay attention and publicize what's going on. I don't want intervention. I don't want military action. I want a lot of focus and condemnation on violence. Do you think we'll get it right this time?
Fingers crossed. I think that Trump's Truth Social post, he has a flair for the language, and it evokes potential like America's will come to their rescue. We are locked and loaded. That evokes military, but it doesn't explicitly say military. I don't think there is really a military option right now, as
Correct.
much as I want to see the Iranian people succeed. But there are lots of things, and I just did a ton of reporting on this, so you're catching me at the right time. There are a lot of things that we can do. We can do cyber things where we helped blind the security services against the
Oh,
demonstrators. We can publicize, you're absolutely right, people who have been abducted and things like that. We can publicize the names of people who shoot others. And we've already started to see that among the Iranians themselves. And what I would say, and what surprised me as I've been reporting the story, Hugh, is that the State Department under Marco Rubio has been there already. So you can find statements from Marco Rubio from before when these protests started, December 12th, saying, yeah, we're really concerned about how the regime treats its own people. You can also find, if you look at the Farsi account of the State Department, really specific posts for the last 6 months about demonstrations that didn't get much attention, individual activists. I spoke to people who are in the U.S. government who are, kind of anonymous sources saying that they have been tracking at a very high level of detail the people who are emerging as a kind of, leaders of a leaderless movement that's very disparate right now. So I think there's a lot that can be done. And American people can show solidarity. You can raise money and figure out ways to raise money for secure communications, things that Elon Musk can do in terms of Starlink and trying to make it so that Iranian cell phones can connect without a base station, which are, going to get you in a lot of trouble with the security services right now. And finally, like raising money for things like a strike fund. We're not seeing a general strike, which is what preceded the 1979 revolution. But I think the fact that this one started with the merchant class. By the way, the merchant class started the original 1905 constitutional revolution. The merchant class were a huge part of the reason why the Khomeini 79 revolution. The fact that it started with the merchant class this time around is very significant. So I don't want to make any predictions, but the Iranian people continue to tell us loud and clear they do not want to be ruled by the mullahs.
so Eli, Haviv Redigur beat all of American media to this story. He had a hour-long conversation with Iranian dissident Roya Haqqanian this morning, and I listened to it and I said, "Where are our people? Do you think this is a test for CBS Evening News and a test for every network to cover this? Because there are a lot of diaspora Iranians out there who speak very well at length about. I didn't realize how broken Iran is. The reservoirs are dry. The electricity is intermittent. Where do we go to get more stuff?"
All right, well, you're going to get me in trouble with my boss and my dear friend Barry Weiss. So I don't want to, but I will say this. I mean, I have not had any conversations, obviously, with her. I'm on the Free Press side, but I would imagine that this is going to be a story, hopefully, that CBS News is going to cover. And frankly, it should be something that CNN covers. Everybody should be covering this. It's the biggest story in the world right now. I 100% agree. The implications, if you think about it, we've got two kind of moves that Trump's doing right now. He is expressing solidarity 100% with the Iranian people in Iran. There are domino effects in the Middle East, and then Venezuela. Keep your eye on Venezuela. If the Maduro regime goes down, I think Cuba's in a lot of trouble too.
Eli Lake, follow him on X at Eli Lake. Read him in the Free Press, and do not miss an episode of Breaking History. First broadcast of the new year for me. As it is, first time I've talked to Matt Continetti of the Wall Street Journal and the American Enterprise Institute in 2026. Happy New Year, Matt. I hope it's off to a good start for you.
Happy New Year, Hugh. It is.
Let's begin with the biggest story in the world, Iran. Not a lot of Americans know what's going on there because it's not being covered very well by our media. How important is this series of developments and protests in your view?
Well, I think that's important. Iran goes through this every few years, it seems, widespread public protests, regime crackdown. I think this particular outbreak's important for a few reasons, Hugh. The first is after Operation Midnight Hammer, our strike on the Iranian nuclear facilities, the commentariat all pronounced that this would strengthen the regime, that Iranians would rally to the regime. In fact, the exact opposite has happened. And the Iranian people are showing their frustration with their government, which has been unable to provide them basic utilities such as water or energy. Of course, inflation is out of control. Economic and political breakdown in the months since Operation Midnight Hammer. So that's important. The second reason it's important is there seems to be a split within the regime, with some political elements saying that they understand what the protesters are complaining about, that they want to even take action to mollify them. And that suggests that we could have a difference here between earlier widespread protests like the Green Revolution, say in 2009, where the government itself begins to fracture. That could lead to regime collapse. And then the third reason why this protest is different is we have an American president who has situated himself on the side of the protesters. And President Trump's remarkable post on social media this morning, where he said that America is ready to protect the protesters if the Iranian government opens fire on them, is a true remarkable stance for an American president to take. It's the first time, whether these protests happened under Obama or they happened under Trump or they happened under Biden, that the American president has said that he stands alongside the protesters. For those three reasons, I'd say this has the potential to be much more than a typical flare-up against the regime.
The typical flare-ups, by my calculation, 1979, the Iranian Revolution, Jimmy Carter's president. The late 1990s is the first attempt to throw off the regime. Bill Clinton is president. The Green Movement is 2009. President Obama is president. And then the young woman was murdered in 2022 in the protests there that were ignored by the Biden administration. Those four seminal moments occurred under Democratic presidents who were weak on national security and with an administration that was averse to any kind of vocal support. Do you think we'll see Secretary Rubio and UN Ambassador Waltz in the game talking about Iran this week?
I think I've already seen Ambassador Waltz make some statements. I'm sure we'll see Secretary Rubio follow through. And, you know, Hugh, you bring to mind this idea of maximum pressure. That was always kind of the motto of the Trump administration's approach to Iran. It began in the first term where the Trump administration applied economic pressure, really squeezing the regime, withdrew from the nuclear agreement that Obama had made, took out Soleimani, the head of the IRGC. And now we have this second term where Trump has took out the Fordow nuclear facility, building on Israel's achievements in taking out other nuclear and missile production sites during the war earlier last year. Now we have additional maximum pressure, and we have Trump on the side of the protesters. So there's a moment of opportunity here, I think, where we could really score a victory for freedom if the Iranians do take that next step to bring down the mullahs. Now,
Donald Trump has used military power against Venezuela. I'm not sure it makes sense to use any military power in Iran right now, unless it is absolute chaos and American interests and people are threatened. What I read in that True Social post this morning was the kind of vocal focus and support that was lacking under Presidents Biden, Obama, Clinton, and, of course, Jimmy Carter. Do you actually expect anything more than that? I mean, Fordow was great. Operation Midnight Hammer was great, but I don't expect anything more than that.
In the near future, probably not. I mean, it depends on what the regime does, of course. But let's not forget, that just last week when Prime Minister Netanyahu visited Trump at Mar-a-Lago, what we got out of that meeting was President Trump saying, look, if the Iranians move to restore their nuclear program, Israel has a green light, and America will take action too. So I don't think we're done with Iran quite yet.
I hope not. Matt, the last book I read in 2025, and I finished it yesterday, is Joseph Epstein's 2024 memoir, Never Say You've Had a Lucky Life, especially if you've had a lucky life. It's absolutely brilliant. Have you read it?
Not only did I read it, I reviewed it for the Wall Street Journal, Hugh.
Oh,
So there, I
well,
stumped you. I stumped you, my friend.
You
this time.
did. You beat me. Tell people have heard me talk about Joseph Epstein for years. Bring me the brain of Joseph Epstein. He has repeatedly, politely turned down the invitation to be on the program. He doesn't like this format or whatever. But I think he is our most brilliant essayist. Is there anyone else in his league?
Oh no, I'm certainly not living any longer. Joe is one of the last great literary journalists, literary intellectual. I've often recommended his books to young people as a form of graduate school. I mean, certainly they amount to earning a master's, even a PhD in literary and cultural history. I own all of his books. I return to them again and again. He's a brilliant writer, whether he's writing on sports or culture or movies or books. Though I think I like his literary biography the best, when he kind of locates an author and just writes a very long essay talking about the author's life and work. Those are my favorite Epstein.
I do love all that. I also have not all of his books. I don't have his book on divorce, for example, but I've got probably 90% of them, and they're well thumbed. How do you get that smart? Because, he's very self-effacing in this autobiography. He's in Little Rock, Arkansas, married to his first wife with 2 boys that were not his own. He ended up with 4. There's tragedy in his life. There's sadness. There's grief. There's brilliant writing. But how do you learn all this stuff? He didn't do any work until he was 25. Work being educational, hard work.
Well, the University of Chicago helps. There's no doubt about that. And the curriculum there, especially when Epstein went there, was pretty demanding and wide-ranging. It still is, to, I think, a large extent. And then, of course, in some of his essays, Epstein points out other places where you acquire culture: libraries, used bookstores, and
Yeah.
he's he haunts the used bookstores, going through them and picking up volumes that he reads and learns from. And another way you acquire this learning is through time. Epstein has been at it for a long time. He's in his 9th decade now, or approaching it very soon. And that work builds up, and that store of cultural knowledge builds up over time, to the point where, in the last 10 years or so, Joe's been writing mainly about classical authors, the Greeks and Romans, figures that, he didn't really pay much attention to for most of his career, but now he's been writing eloquently and learnedly about them as well.
I just want to warn the audience, when you never say you've had a lucky life, especially if you've had a lucky life, you'll just feel so dumb. But persevere. He'll help you out of that. Even if you have to look up things, as I had to do repeatedly. Matt, did you watch the Tony DeCopel video about his promise about how he's going to approach anchoring duties at CBS Evening News?
I did. I thought it was a breath of fresh air. It's amazing that this counts as novelty in the world of corporate media. But I'm happy that Tony gave the message. And you know what? I think he and CBS News are going to try hard to deliver on it.
Now, the second question, I'll come back to Tony. Nick Shirley and Minnesota, do you count that as journalism?
I do. It's reporting. It's investigating. It's talking to people. It's going to places. It's recording what you see and hear. It's reporting your conclusions. So it is journalism.
Yes,
And
it is.
I think it's highly influential journalism, considering that Nick Shirley has kind of amplified this ongoing welfare fraud scandal in Minnesota to the next level, where not just conservatives are talking about it, but Americans of all persuasions are doing so.
Now, what Nick Shirley has, that I'm not sure Tony DeCopel and CBS has yet, is a unique experience. He was, I don't know if you read up on him, he was a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Chile for 2 years. Were you aware of that?
No, it wasn't.
Well, that means you knock on thousands of doors of strangers, and sometimes they might shoot at you or set a dog on you. Sometimes they might invite you in to have dinner, but you do it for 2 years. I always call them my LDS law students on the first day of class, because they're absolutely fearless if they've been missionaries. I think a lot of that came through, and the echo of it in old journalism. Show up and ask a question or two. That's all it really is. The late Michael Kelly used to say on this program, journalism is a craft, not a profession. And I think he was right. Now, Tony DeCopel sits atop, not a throne of skulls, but a vast newsroom that's a pipeline of people with pre-existing conditions when it comes to the media that feed him stuff. Anchors really don't often write the news. Brett does occasionally. Do you think it matters who the anchor is at a place like CBS with its legacy journalists there in the newsroom?
Well, I do think anchors matter because they might not do the reporting, they may not even do the writing, but an active anchor will put his or her personality in how they present the information, which stories they highlight. They will change the script. We know that our friend Brett Baer takes a very active role.
Yes.
On the CNN side, Jake Tapper will take an active role. You can have, of course, someone who's not quite an anchor, but a CBS personality, Mike Wallace. You knew what you were getting from Mike Wallace. He had a hand in it, and from his son, Chris Wallace, as well. So I do think the personality of the anchor matters quite a bit, and that's why I was happy to see this message from Tony DeCopel over the weekend.
Now, I told my sister-in-law yesterday at a birthday party / New Year's Day gathering that Barry Weiss, who I've only spoken to once and only ever worked on one thing together, and ended up not getting printed because we just couldn't get through the editorial process together when she was at the Journal. I told her I thought Barry Weiss was a center-left journalist and that she should trust her. Do you agree with that assessment, center-left?
I would say she's center. She certainly has, liberal instincts, but it's an older liberalism than what we think of when we hear the word today. I mean, she believes in equality. She believes in freedom. She believes in merit. She believes in America's alliance with the state of Israel. All of those values were part of the liberal side for many decades on the American left. They are less so today. So, she may distance herself from some aspects of conservatism, certainly Trumpism, and that definitely puts her on the center. I don't know if it quite puts her on the center left, Hugh.
Well, I've always used the baseball analogy when it comes to news people. They play center field, they play right field like I do, or they play left field in the way that, for example, the New York Times in the left field bleachers.
They're
out
of the
Post.
stadium.
Yeah, Ruth Marcus. All right, Ruth Marcus is a classic center left person, and there are a bunch of them out there, and they're fair-minded, and they know what they're talking about, and they know the other side. We may not agree, but you're going to get fairness out of them. What worries me is that I looked up the numbers. CBS is way behind. ABC World News, 7.19 million in October. NBC Nightly News, 5.63 million in October. CBS, 3.55 million in October. How long will it take to actually regain trust of the sort? I told Eli Lake this in the last segment. When I was 21, about to begin my last year in college, 6 guys in the summer, after we played golf or went to the Indians game or screwed around, whatever, we'd always watch 60 Minutes. Same 6 guys drinking beers and watching 60 Minutes. That's gone. That demo's gone now. How in the world do you get it back, Matt?
Oh, I think that's the big question. I think it attaches to individuals more than to networks, say, or the way to build a great network is to have a stable of individual anchors and reporters that audiences trust and want to watch, want to key into. And so I think that's why this appointment of the new anchor and the messages he's sending is a good sign. We want to see what happens next with Barry Weiss, her hires. Can she come up with individuals that audiences really respond to? Because I think the Nick Shirley example is very important in this context, Hugh. Is that here you have one person. He's got maybe some friends holding the camera, driving him around different places. It's a very small, light unit, and yet he had a major effect on his reporting. It's a lesson that we took to when we were founding the Washington Free Beacon, and that Eliana Johnson still applies with the journalism of the Washington Free Beacon, is that with just a few people asking the right questions and looking in places where others aren't looking, you can have a major impact on events in politics and society. So it's a question of finding the right people. And if there's one thing I know about Barry Weiss, having worked for her for a little bit last year, she knows people, and she's a great talent spotter.
Well said. That's what they need. Matt Continetti, follow him on X at Continetti. Read him in the Journal, read him at AEI, and hear him most Fridays right here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. I am in a period of mourning. The Ohio State University Buckeyes lost on New Year's Eve. Now, 2025 was a pretty good year for the Buckeyes because they won the national championship and they beat Michigan, that's a pretty good year. They were, however, upset by the Miami Hurricanes, and that hurt. I don't know who kidnapped the team in the first half. I'll talk with Doug Lesmerises about that next hour. But they're not. They're done. They're done. And I'll talk to Doug about that. So I go up the implacable hill this morning. It's 5 miles to the top and back. And I'm listening first to Be Ready Guru. Then I turn on my trusty former producer, Dwayne. And he's got a podcast, Dwayne's World. I say former because really this is about the time that it's 25 years. I think you just say goodbye. Because how does he begin? He doesn't begin with Happy New Year, and he doesn't begin, no, he begins with poor old Hugh. His Buckeyes got crushed by Miami. His Guardians are terrible. The Browns are terrible. They got a 5th-round draft point. He's miserable. No, I'm not. The Guardians made the playoffs. The Browns had a great resetting season. Shador can play quarterback, and no one wins back-to-back. But I got to say, did you not think I would listen to your first podcast of the year at Dwayne's World? Did you think I was going to ignore that?
I believe the record will show that at the top of my podcast, I promoted HughHewitt.com and the YouTube
you let
channel.
me in. You trapped everyone. You absolutely set me up. Oh, he's being nice to me. And then you come around with the Ohio State. I mean, it's too soon. It's way too soon. It's been 2 days.
It's been a year. It's been a year since they lost.
Oh, man. That was so brutal. I have not even listened. There are lots of podcasts out there like the Bill and Doug Show on Big Ten and Ohio State football. We'll talk with Doug Lesmerises next hour. There's Buckeye Talk from Cleveland.com. There's a lot. I haven't listened to anything. I've just been depressed. And then my long trusting
at two
Generalissimo. I turn on Dwayne's World, which I was going to recommend everyone add to their podcast list along with Highly Concentrated.
It's a fine podcast, by the way.
I don't know. I couldn't get through. It was like I was kicked in the stomach in the last 2 miles of the trundle.
Yeah, that's just the hill.
It was not the hill. It was you. You did that to me. If people want to hear how cruel Dwayne can be, go and get Dwayne's World and listen for just the first 15 minutes because it's not just a punch in the stomach. I was down and he kicked me a few times. It was not just a little bit, sorry about Ohio State. No. It was a mugging. I could bring charges. Inside the Relief Factor studio out west where I am for a few weeks, if you marry a California girl, and I did, I got lucky. I met a beautiful California girl in 1978, and she said yes, we got married in 1982. You can't spend the winter in the East. They're just not cut out for it. And so most years I'm teaching at Chapman Law School, but I'm taking this year off. And it's an election year, and I usually do because there are demands on my time and from Fox News, et cetera, things like that. But I'm out here for a few weeks, and thanks to my former producer, Dwayne, I'm able to talk to you today. Harley and Adam, of course. Some of you are hearing me for the very first time because at the beginning of the year, or it might be Monday. This is the first broadcast day of the month. A lot of stations change formats, change owners, pick up new shows, drop old shows. Some of you find the podcast, Highly Concentrated Hugh, which is available wherever podcasts are, Salem Podcast Network, iTunes, Spotify, wherever. Like and subscribe. tens of thousands of you begin your morning with the Hugh Hewitt show from the day before, which is heard live 3 to 6 p.m. in the East. And so it's got all the day's news, to the extent that there is news. And a lot of you just begin your day with it the next morning. That's why I always say morning glory, evening grace. But it is my practice, and has been since Dwayne Adam and I got started in 2000, to always give a little bit of the backdrop to who I am, so you know whether or not you want to listen to me or trust me. And it's all very simple. I am a son of and a grandson of Ohio. All 4 of my grandparents were born, raised, lived, died, buried in Ashtabula, Ohio. My mom and dad got married after the war. Dad was youngest of 3 boys. He got to the war in time to occupy Japan. He said the most dangerous thing he did was transit ships to the Philippines and then floating offside of Japan before Truman dropped the atomic bombs, when there were Japanese submarines left and kamikazes. So he really was not in the war, but he was part of it. Brother flew over the hump. Another brother flew in Europe in the B-29s. So the greatest generation raised us, and I grew up in Warren, Ohio, steel town, car town. At that time, 75,000 people. I'm born in 1956. I turned 70 in a month. And car town, steel town, very, very prosperous in the 50s and the 60s, not so much in the 70s, and the plummeting began in the 80s and the 90s. And maybe it will rekindle now. The one thing Ohio has is water, but it made me who I am. I'm Roman Catholic. I'm actually an evangelical Roman Catholic Presbyterian because my wonderful wife, the fetching Mrs. Hewitt's a Presbyterian. I'm a cradle Catholic, so I usually go to Mass on Saturday and to the Presbyterian Church on Sunday. Double dipper, one river, 2 banks. We're good. And I spent 12 years in Catholic education, and then got into Harvard under the Ohio lottery and good test scores, back in the days when they basically let in people who did well on the national merit scholarship business. So I went there, studied government, wish I was smart enough to be a Straussian, took all the classes I could from Harvey Mansfield and Nathan Tarkov and a bunch of other people, but I wasn't smart enough to be a PhD, so I applied to and did not get into law school at either Harvard or Michigan, where I wanted to go. So I went instead via, the 8 most important words in the English language are, I know a guy, and have you ever considered? Well, Ed Mansfield, Harvey's son, saw me sitting on the steps one day and said, what are you doing next year? When I was a senior in college. I said, I have no idea. I didn't get into Harvard or Michigan. I don't want to go to the University of Chicago. Nobody wants to go to the University of Chicago. It's where fun goes to die. And I didn't know that the University of Virginia was as beautiful as it was. And so I don't know. I didn't have a job. He said, well, you ought to call a guy. I know a guy. That ears perk up. And it was a guy named Ray Price down in D.C. And he had taught at Harvard a year before. He was looking for a research assistant on a book on the media. So I called him up. He said, why don't you fly on down and we'll talk about it. So I got on an airplane. I was not much of a flyer. I would drive from Ohio to Boston, to Cambridge. And I put on my only suit and flew down to D.C. and knocked on Ray's house in Georgetown on Prospect. And he answered the door and said, yes, can I help you? I said, well, I'm Hugh Hewitt. We have an interview. And he hit his head, oh, dear. And that's never a good sign. He had forgotten the interview, and he explained he had to go out to San Clemente to work with Richard Nixon on a book that was past deadline after the memoirs called The Real War. And then he paused and said, have you ever considered, which are the second 4 most important words, have you ever considered moving to California? He wasn't offering me a job, but David Eisenhower needed a research assistant. So I said, I hadn't thought about it, but be glad to. Next thing I know, Julie Nixon Eisenhower's on the phone at my dorm, and David gets on the phone. I agree to go do the TikTok for Eisenhower at war. The TikTok's a day-by-day chronology of what Ike was doing during World War II. It's a great book. Won every book award out there. Eisenhower at War by David Eisenhower. And after 3 months, which I guess was sort of a tryout, RN offered me a job on his writing staff, which consisted of RN, Ray Price, a fellow in D.C. whose name was Todd. I can't remember his last name. And then me. And I became a ghostwriter, editorial assistant, researcher to the former president in exile in San Clemente. That was great fun until he moved to New York in 1980, and I lasted about 6 months there. Said to the boss, I'm going to go to law school. I'd reapplied and gotten into Michigan, not Harvard, but got into Michigan the second time. He said, go with God. No one can be in this city unless you've got a lot of money or none at all. And I left and went to Ann Arbor, got married during the course of law school to the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, and then did a clerkship on the D.C. Circuit, unusual clerkship. Judge Roger Robb hired me. Then he got sick, so I worked for Judge Bork, Judge Scalia, Judge Ginsburg, Judge Skelly Wright, Judge Spots Robinson, and then George McKinnon came back from Minnesota, and I just went full-time with George McKinnon until Roger Robb came back. It was a fabulous year. And then I was going to go to work at Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. But then I got a phone call. Have you ever considered coming to the Department of Justice? My friend Terry Eastland was working over there for William French Smith as a speechwriter. I said, have you ever considered? We were in a Bible study together at National Presbyterian Church. And I said, sure, I'd love to do that. And I went over to the Attorney General's office as a special assistant for the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court warrants and a few other things. And so I reviewed all the FISA applications for warrants from the Bureau. There was no National Security Division in 1984. Then I went to the White House counsel's office with Ricardo, who now runs a hot dog stand and a driving range in Miami, and actually makes his retirement by hustling. He's a hustler on the golf course. Do not give him strokes. Ricardo's Cuban hot dogs are fine. The driving range is fine. Don't play golf with the man. And Fred Fielding. Then I went into the agencies. Then finally, after all that time, ended up running OPM, because if you hang around an administration at the end, they promote people, anyone who's around. I got picked to run OPM, got through the Senate, got confirmed. OPM's the Office of Personnel Management. Then we finally went to California because Richard Nixon called and the dime dropped. He'd been good to me. Will you build the library? So I came out to San Clemente again, and this time I didn't move to San Clemente, but I moved closer to where the library is in Yorba Linda, and I started a law practice, and I got the Nixon Library built and open, and then I got a call from KFI Radio. Have you ever considered doing weekend radio? I said, does it pay anything? I'm poor. I said, yeah, $500 a weekend. So I did 6 hours of radio for KFI on the weekends for a few years. Then I got a call, have you ever considered doing TV? This is 1992 for KCET, and I did 10 years anchoring the nightly news with Pat Morrison, Ruben Martinez, Kerman Maddox on Life and Times. Then Salem called, and this motley crew got together, and we launched this show on July 10, 2000. I'm still practicing law. In between, I started teaching constitutional law at Chapman Law School. I'm better than your average con law professor. Not as good as some, better than most. And I've been teaching at Chapman Con Law since 1996. Began in 1995 teaching torts, those poor kids. What I know about torts, I learned the night before that year. But I know con law and practicing administrative law. And then we started the show in 2000. Then I got asked to do the debates in 2015, 2016, which we partnered Salem with CNN. I was the Salem guy. And did 4 presidential debates. Got offers from the networks then. Went to work for NBC for 4 years and MSNBC. So I've been before the mast. I did my years in big media. Then the Washington Post offered me a column. I wrote that. Then I left NBC, mutual agreement. We just did not get along. Then I quit the Washington Post. And most of the people there were wonderful, but there was a problem. And then I went to work for Fox News. I keep doing this show, and we're on the Salem News Channel now. And I've written a dozen books, and I write columns twice a week for Fox News. I write for the Washington Examiner, and I'm a talking head. I think I'm on Hannity tonight. Doubt that Sean's back from vacation. I'll bet you it's Kellyanne. Normally asks for me to be on the panel when she's in. I'll be on Fox and Friends in the morning. I'm a Fox News contributor, but I'm a Salem guy. And what we do is bring you the news you need, the analysis you've come to trust, and great guests. We are center-right and proud of it, fact-based, serious, fun, and I keep you up to date on the Cleveland Browns, the Cleveland Guardians, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Ohio State University Buckeyes, who may not win back-to-back championships, but are a good bet in 2027. I want to let you know, this story in Iran is getting bigger. The protests across the country have spread across the country now in more than 70 cities. And a half dozen people are reported to have been killed by the security services. I can't really keep up because American media is mostly on vacation. Like I'm working today, and Dwayne and Adam and Harley are working today, but many people are not. And so the A team is not working, at most of America's major news media outlets. Fox News is doing a good job on this. Wall Street Journal had a good piece this morning, but it's real time, and they're 12 hours, roughly 9 hours ahead of the East Coast, 12 hours ahead of the West Coast in Tehran, roughly. It's a half hour off in Tehran for some reason that I just don't understand, but it's a half day ahead of us. So, it's the middle of the night there now, and we just don't really know what's going to happen or what happened after Friday prayers. But hopefully we'll learn more, and American media will get back on the job and cover it. What they did cover yesterday was the swearing in of new Mayor Mamdani. Comrade Mamdani is now the mayor of New York. The quote that will live in infamy is cut number 1.
We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism.
All right. Where to begin? Collectivism, you got to go back to Joseph Stalin and the kulaks and the collectivism of the farmers, the small farmers in early Soviet era before World War II to understand that collectivism means we're going to starve all of you people to death. That's what collectivism means to me. And it got a few more tries outside of the Soviet Union. Like Cuba is a shining example of collectivism. Nothing works, and they depend on hot oil from Venezuela to keep what lights they have on. All right, it's a complete grinding, disaster, secret police exporting failed state. China, the great leap forward. Again, I don't know how smart Mamdani is. He went to a good college. Bowdoin's a good college, but I don't know if he went to class. I've never heard him give a serious interview. Does he even know what the Great Leap Forward is? Mao's the greatest killer of the 20th century. I hope you know that. More than Stalin, who's in second place. Hitler's in third place. Pol Pot's in fourth place. But the Great Leap Forward was another, we'll go for collectivism and we'll starve you all to death. And then Deng Xiaoping came along and said, socialism or communism with capitalistic aspects. And that meant privatizing farms again. Nothing collectively works. That's why I always hated. And I don't know if everyone is either one of two things. You either people who love group projects in school or you hated them. Dwayne, did you like group projects in school?
Hated him.
Hated them. Adam, did you like group projects in school?
Hated them.
Harley, did you like group projects in school?
Not particularly.
No, I loathe them. And you know why? The four of us are working on January 2nd. That means we have a work ethic. I don't think I've ever had less than 3 jobs in 45 years. Sometimes I've had 5. Work. I don't want to give my money to people who do not work.
90% of the work is done by 10% of the people.
But that's a little bit high. I think it used to be Pete Wilson, the great and good Pete Wilson, the Wizard of Oz, when California worked, used to say, you have to have more people pulling the wagon than are in the wagon. And that California, when he took over, had 7 people pulling the wagon and 3 people in the wagon. And at the end of the time, it was still 7-3, so he'd been a good governor. I think we're now 4-6. I think there are 4 people pulling the wagon and 6 people in California. I'm in California. I'm a Virginian. I'm not a Californian. I underscore that. I am not a citizen of California. I am visiting for a few weeks. And I think we got 4 people. I did live here from 1989 to 2015. So I know California pretty well. And I lived here from 1978 to 1980. So I had 2 more years, more than half my life, really, in California. And certainly a lot more than Ohio or Virginia. The only other 2 places I've lived. I lived in Michigan for 3 years. I have to throw those 3 deeply regrettable years. No, I love Michigan Law School. Really did. I had great roommates. And I went to the Big House, with a fine stadium. I saw Ohio State beat Michigan there once. And the other 2 games were on the road. The game. That is in the game for the Ohio State University. And collectivism does not work. So what was the first thing they did? They moved to do rent control over everything they can in New York City. And he replaced the school chancellor with someone who was an avowed opponent of advanced placement classes and gifted and talented student education. Now, I didn't have any AP classes. Catholic schools were not very big on AP classes in the 60s and 70s because they had 40 kids in the classroom, right? The nuns were keeping order and drilling you, and you did the 3 R's, and you did it with a tie on, and you didn't miss with Sister Timothy. You just didn't. And same thing at good old John F. Kennedy High School in Warren, Ohio. We had great teachers, but no advanced placement classes. Now, there were only 2 students in ancient Greek, so I guess that was an advanced placement class. But collectivism, it does not work. Here's what he also said. Cut number 3.
Beginning today, we will govern expansively and audaciously. We may not always succeed, but never will we be accused of lacking the courage to try. To those who insist that the era of big government is over, hear me when I say this. No longer will City Hall hesitate to use its power to improve New Yorkers' lives. For too long, we have turned to the private sector for greatness while accepting mediocrity from those who serve the public. I cannot blame anyone who has...
Stop. I can't listen to it. I think he believes this. And if I could just pause it, if I could actually get an interview with him, I'd say, okay, so what has the public sector ever invented except nuclear weapons and Columbia-class submarines and Ohio-class submarines? I mean, we did Phantom Jet defense, I understand. But what exactly has the public sector invented? What are you expecting? This is such a train wreck. And I don't live there. Thank God for some things. I do not live in New York. I have a friend who's buying an apartment in New York. I think he's lost his mind, but he's doing it right now. It's my belief if you wait a year, you'll get 50% off because it's not a place you want to be. But this fellow, I got more on the other side. He appears to believe this stuff. And there is nowhere it has ever worked, not once, not ever, never. And it cannot work in New York City. And boy, oh boy, those poor people are going to get hurt big time. It's going to be a nightmare. Just found out from our friend James Bly that we're picking up a new affiliate in Pensacola, Florida, which makes me very happy, but it starts Monday. So I got to redo everything I just did at the top of this hour on Monday, because I thought they would start on the first broadcast day of the new year, which was today. But no, it's Monday. So I got to redo it all on Monday. But I'm looking forward to it because the good folks down at News Radio Pensacola 92.3 WNRP, I'm going to serve you well. Now, one of the things you hear me talk about, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. They sponsor the studio. I have great sponsors. And most of them have been sponsors for a long time. One of those has only been a sponsor for a year, but they're doing very well because they do very well by you, Consumer Cellular. Now, write down their phone number, 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454, and remember my promo code, which isn't really hard, Hugh, H-U-G-H, Hugh, and you can call 1-800-411-4454 and say, I'm calling about the special offer from Hugh. Or you can go to consumercellular.com/Hugh, and the same thing, consumercellular.com/Hugh. Why should you switch? Because you're paying too much for your wireless service. Almost certainly. Have you looked at your phone bill recently? If you haven't, before you call, before you do it, get it out and have it in front of you because it'll tell you how much data you're using and how much data you're paying for. A lot of you want unlimited data plans, and that's fine. If you're over 50, you definitely want to go to Consumer Cellular because if you want unlimited data, they will give you 2 lines for $60 a month. 2 numbers. You can keep your old numbers, by the way. Keep your old data, keep your old contacts. It takes about 20 minutes to switch. But no matter how much data you use, you don't have to sacrifice savings for service or service for savings. You can have both service and savings. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh or 1-800-411-4454. And please do not be tempted by the phone on us by Big Wireless. That phone is not free. Typically, it's the most expensive phone you can buy. Look at the actual cost of the plan, how long you're locked into it, and you'll find that that phone might be costing you more than $1,000. Just remember, right now, if you use my name, Hugh, you'll get your second month of cellular service for free. All right, that's the offer on the table right now, 1-800-411-4454. I got to go back to Mr. Mamdani. Comrade Mamdani, cut number 5.
Two questions. The first one, there was a pretty big tax the rich chant. I know a lot of your supporters like it. The governor doesn't love that phrase. Could you maybe speak to that divide and where that fits among your priorities going forward?
You know, I have said over the course of our campaign, and I will now say as the mayor of this city, that the two most straightforward ways to raise revenue, to not only take on the fiscal challenges that we are inheriting, but also to fulfill the affordability agenda that we have been running on, is by raising taxes on the 1% of New Yorkers who make $1 million a year by an additional 2%, and by raising the state's top corporate tax rate to match that of New Jersey. And in this, we would raise $9 billion. And we put this forward because it is critical in a moment like this to not allow fiscal challenges to become an excuse for austerity, but instead to respond to them with the seriousness they deserve and the ambition that New Yorkers require, such that we not only protect what they have today, but ensure that they have more tomorrow.
All right, that won't work because the state of New York has not lost its mind. He needs the state of New York to approve that, either of those things, and they're not going to because they know everybody will leave. And a lot of people have already left. They will just leave. All right, so that's number one. His $8 billion is myth. It's a unicorn. It's not coming in. Cut number 6, please.
Here is what I want you to expect from the administration that this morning moved into the building behind me. We will transform the culture of City Hall from one of no to one of how. We will answer to all New Yorkers, not to any billionaire or oligarch who thinks they can buy our democracy. We will govern without shame and insecurity, making no apology for what we believe. I was elected as a democratic socialist, and I will govern as a democratic socialist.
Oh, it is going to be such a disaster. I have no animus towards New York. I lived there, as I said in the monologue at the top of the hour, for 6-7 months. I go there a lot. The news business takes me up there often. I love the city. I love a lot of people in the city. And I fear for the city because this guy has never had a job and does not have a clue. And I cannot believe you can go from Michael Bloomberg to Zoran Mamdani in 5 years with Eric Adams in between. But that is a way to fall off a cliff. Stay tuned. Doug Lesmerises is here to mourn with me about Ohio State. Doug Lesmerises is one of the hosts of the Bill and Doug Show, which you can always get everything on it at billanddougosu.substack.com and the free podcast at the Bill and Doug Show. They are experts in Ohio State and Big Ten and college football. I think it's the best college football show in America. Doug, since New Year's Eve, with about a minute and a half left in the game, I have felt awful. And it's because I don't know these kids. I call them kids. They're young men, 19 to 22. But I like Sonny Styles and Tegra and Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith and Julian Sand. And I think Ryan Day is good. And I like Brian Hartline. I don't know them, though, but I feel awful for them. You know them. So you must feel really crappy.
Well, you know, I've been interacting with a lot of fans since then. I kind of feel worse for the fans because they take this to heart. I will say it is a little mitigated, Hugh. They won the national title a year ago. So
Yes.
Those guys that you're talking about, they still have rings. They still have memories. They still have felt the confetti fall on their heads. They were trying to accomplish something that had never been done in Ohio State history, which is go back-to-back as national champions. And they had talked about that. Ryan Day said going in to the game against Miami, you know, that had been on their minds for 10 months. So there was an opportunity there, especially when you go through the regular season 12-0 and you beat Michigan and you're number one in the country. There's an opportunity to make history, to go down as potentially the greatest team ever. at one of the greatest programs ever. So that is very difficult. It reminds me a little bit, Hugh, of like 2013, the buildup. Ohio State was 12-0 in 2013, lost in the Big Ten championship game to Michigan State, lost their bowl game to Clemson. And it's that they were so good along the way, and you started thinking historic things. That made it worse when they fell short at the end.
So, Doug, how do you cover this in the aftermath? Obviously, you got to cover the playoffs, and we'll talk about that next Friday. But how do you talk to, say, a Sonny Styles who's a graduating senior, or Cornell Tate, who I hope ends up wearing a Browns uniform next year? Do they make themselves available, or are they basically grieving away from people? And this goes for Ryan Day and the coaching staff as well.
Yeah, it's they do make themselves available. They bring 3 people into the post-game news conference. It was Caleb Downs and Julian Sayin as players and Ryan Day as the head coach. That wasn't super long. They had interviews on the side with some other players, Sonny Styles, who seemed very composed, Carson Hinsman, Caden Curry, and the locker room was open. So my partner Bill Landis was in there talking to some people. So, like, you do have to face the music to some degree, right? That's kind of part of it, and I think that's okay in sports when you're celebrated in victory. I think it's okay to answer questions in defeat. You know, it was interesting. Some people have brought up, some of our Ohio State fans who follow us have brought up the idea that, like Kirby Smart suffered a really tough loss, Georgia against Ole Miss last night. And, like, Kirby Smart after the game was kind of like, not bubbly, but was just sort of like, you know, hey, that's a great game. And like, what are you going to do? And like Ohio State, Ryan Day, they really took it hard. So I do think it's interesting. I think you can set the tone for your fan base in sort of how you deal with the loss. And Ohio State, they took it hard. You know, I mean, everybody loses sometimes, and they're the defending national champs, but they did take this thing hard, I think, because they know there was something there that fell just outside their grasp.
Well put. These seniors do have a national championship, and they did beat the team up north in 2025. Yep. And they are all coming back except for, well, there's some big names. You mentioned Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles. They're not coming back. Cornell Tate's not coming back. But Ryan Day strikes me as a pretty emotional guy, though he keeps it bottled up, and like Urban Meyer and maybe not Jim Tressel so much. Is he more emotional than the other head coaches in college football?
He takes losses hard, and I think he did. Urban took losses hard, right? And it's interesting to me. I want to write about this. I want to talk about this with our audience. Can they set a tone? Because Ohio State fans take a loss hard. Because I think the standard at Ohio State is higher than anywhere else in the country. And there's a lot of great things that come with that. Holding yourself to a high standard, everyone around you to a high standard, sets up opportunities for success. And they have been the most consistently successful college football program since Woody Hayes got here in 1951. So that's what they are. And so in some way, no loss is ever acceptable. But, you know, Miami's good, and it was a tough matchup. And, good. You know, there was an interception return for a touchdown that flipped the game, and Ohio State missed a field goal that might have helped. And so, you know, they didn't get blown off the field. There were some things they couldn't stop from Miami's pass rush in the first half. But I think it can be difficult, Hugh. It's the opposite of being a Browns fan. It is so crazy for someone like you, who is both an Ohio State and a Browns fan. It is 180 degrees. Almost every little morsel of success for the Browns is worth the ticker tape parade, because you assume losing. For Ohio State, you assume victory, and then every loss is devastating. Ohio State went 12-2. The Browns are going to win 4 games this year. But Ohio State fans, like you and thousands, millions of others, are devastated right now because Ohio State's so good.
What is your in the Substack chat room? Bill and Doug, OSU.substack.com. What is the general? I haven't listened to a minute. Yeah. I can't bear it yet. I'll wait a while and then I'll listen to it. But what's the general immediate? Are they mad? Are they sad? Are they angry? What is it?
Yeah. So it's 2 things. One is sort of this deficiency about their inability to block Miami. Does it show something with the offensive line coaching, with the offensive game planning? Was there a hole there that they didn't recognize during the season? And is there a deficiency there that should have been figured out, covered up some other way? And then the other is this, and I've been writing about this and talking about this at the Substack, Hugh, that Indiana, Ole Miss, and Miami are three teams, and Oregon to some degree. They all have a lot of transfers on their teams, and we've all gotten used to the transfer world in college football. Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State have far fewer. They are teams that are blue bloods, that are built on recruiting. And right now, a lot of Ohio State fans are asking, does a team like Ohio State, which recruits at a very high level, need to do more getting transfers? Indiana and Ole Miss and Miami, they had to get transfers because they didn't recruit like Ohio State. But here they are. They're still alive and Ohio State's not. This shifting sport is very interesting, but it's making some Ohio State fans wonder, does their strategy of getting players have to change a little bit?
Very interesting. I will buck up. I will listen to every minute of every Bill and Doug show that's been done since the loss over the weekend. I look forward to doing the Friday football forecast a week from today. Doug Lesmerises, follow him on X at Doug Lesmerises. Subscribe to BillAndDougOSU.substack.com for the best college football coverage in America. It's time for the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Every Friday at this hour, Tarzana Joe takes the stage. Hello, Joe. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, you. And do not despair, because if you want to watch some good, dynamic offense, you can watch my Wake Forest Demon Deacons tonight in the Duke's Mayonnaise Bowl from Charlotte. They play Mississippi State. I'm sure you'll have a grand old time watching that.
I didn't know that there was such a thing, but I wish them luck. Go Demon Deacons.
And if you do watch, DeMond Claiborne is the guy the Cleveland Browns should draft. A great running back from Wake Forest. He will bring good things to your team. And now my least favorite time of year is at hand. I'm known to friends and colleagues as the grand procrastinator. My flag contains the motto, I think I'll do it later. So if I have a new resolve or one that is the same, I share the thought with no one because I couldn't take the shame. Sure, I need to lose some weight. Who among us doesn't? But I'd never breathe a word if I was or wasn't. Get my taxes done on time? What a great idea. And yet I'm sure cruel circumstance will once more interfere. Run a mile every day? My wife would be in shock. Like last year, I'll just settle for a walk around the block. Folks my age should lift some weights, that everybody knows. Alas, I have a phobia. I'll drop them on my toes. But as I sat, I realized while working on this rhyme, like all procrastinators, I'm running out of time. So write a resolution, mail or post or text one, and do it in this new year, for there may not be a next one. I've made a little list myself. I don't want to diminish it, and hope by the 10th of May, I'll get around to finish it. That's Resolutions 2026 by Tarzana Joe.
A brilliant way to open the new year, Joe. That will be posted at tarzanajoe.com. Joe, I have a recommendation for you. This book by Joseph Epstein, he is to essays what you are to poetry. It is Never Say You've Had a Lucky Life, especially if you've had a lucky life. It's his memoir. I think Joe is 89 or 90, and so you don't get to quit anytime soon, pal. Tarzanajoe.com, tarzanajoe.com for all your poetry needs. Joe's rates are reasonable. There's a button. What's the button say over tarzanajoe.com?
I want a poem.
I want pretty direct. If you want a poem, just go to tarzanajoe.com and hit that button. Rates are reasonable and the product will always please. It's the new year, so get in line early. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, you.
Don't go anywhere, America. The Hillsdale Dialogue with Dean Matt Spalding is coming up as we begin our 250th anniversary year of the Declaration of Independence. Matt's got a brand new book out, The Making of the American Mind, that went into the Declaration. Wonderful way to end your first 2 days of the new year.